Okay, so we're back, and I'm going to show you guys what the dough looks like now. So remember how I covered up with plastic wrap? Do you see that bubble on top of there? That wasn't there when I first covered it. So what happens to yeast when it activates and it starts eating the starches and the sugars in the dough is that it starts to release carbon dioxide and ethanol, which is a type of alcohol. So that's why you see this bubble here, right? And then that's also why the dough gets bigger, because now it has air pockets, those air pockets of carbon dioxide in it. And it's going to be lighter and fluffier than it was before. So you guys can see it's bigger than it was before. So I'm going to take it out of my bowl and I'm going to roll it with my rolling pin to about a 16 by 21 inch rectangle, but it's probably not going to be perfect because nothing's ever perfect, right? So if I'm rolling something out and I want it in a certain shape, in this case, I want it in a rectangle, I'm going to try to form the dough into a rectangle at the beginning. And that way, we'll hopefully end up with the size that we want or the shape. So the same is going to go with pizza dough. If you guys are making a pizza and you want it to be circular, when you start shaping it at the beginning, you want it to be in a circle. Okay, so you guys can see my dough rolled out here. What we want to do is we want to end up with about 12 cinnamon rolls, give or take. So I have my filling ingredients. We have another 1/3 cup of butter, and it's softened. So I'm going to take my pastry brush and I'm going to spread it out on here, and I'm going to cover the whole surface of the dough. I have done this before with a 1/4 cup of butter, and it's fine. I know some people are like, wow, that's a lot of fat, but you have to remember that this is a rich dough and you want it to stay moist even with all the cinnamon sugar that's going to go in the middle. Cinnamon tends to dry things out. So this butter is going to keep it from getting dried out. Okay, try to be even with it. And then in my bowl over here, I have 1 cup of brown sugar, and I packed it in there, which means when I put it in my measuring cup, I pushed it down, kind of like when you were kids and you made sand castles and you pressed the wet sand into there. That's what you're doing. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to just spread it out over the whole surface of the dough, except for the 2 long edges, because that's where you want to kind of keep the roll together, so you don't want it to come apart, and this will cause it to come apart. Do make sure though that you get all the way to the short edges. Otherwise you're going to have cinnamon rolls without cinnamon sugar in them. Okay, so then I usually end up just spreading it with my hands. Always make sure your hands are extra clean when you start. And then I'm going to start rolling it. So this is the tricky part, and you want to try to get the roll as tight as you can. So sometimes you kind of have to like stop and pull back. So I'm just going to get this edge off the counter, and I'm just going to start rolling it. Kind of hold that down while you roll the rest of it. And then you'll probably have to go back and re-roll some of it because you can see that this is starting to come apart here. Be gentle with your dough. You don't want to rip it apart. If you find that your dough is really sticky after you take it out of the bowl before you start to roll it out, you have a couple options. You can sprinkle a little bit of flour on it and on the counter to keep it from sticking a little bit. Or you can use some cooking spray. I usually go with cooking spray because that keeps the dough from drying out. Okay. And then you are going to Move the roll closer to you. We're going to make sure that our edges are sealed up as best we can. And we're just going to start cutting the roll. And I already have my pans with cooking spray in them. This is where I'm going to set the rolls after I am done cutting them. The original recipe says use a 9x13 pan, but you can use two 8x8 pans if you want. This is called a bench scraper, and I like to use it to cut the cinnamon rolls, but you can use a nice sharp knife if you have one. And you want to make as few slices back and forth as possible with your knife, because the more slices you make, the more likely it is to tear the dough apart. And we're going to try to get these as even as we can. Okay, so I cut half my roll, so I'm going to show you guys what it should look like when you put them in here. And this dough is actually going to have two separate rises. So it is the first one when it's a ball of dough, and then you're going to put the cinnamon rolls in your pan and cover them, and then you're going to have your second rise. If you want, if you are not ready to eat these right away, like say you want these for breakfast tomorrow, you can cover them up and put them in your refrigerator. And then about an hour or so before you're ready to eat, you can just take them out, let them get to room temperature, and then bake them. Okay, so that's what you do to make your cinnamon rolls. Not as hard as some people think it is. So these are going to get baked at 375 for about 20-25 minutes. It depends how your oven cooks. And then when they come out, there's a topping for them. So it's actually 1/4 cup of butter, 3 ounces of cream cheese, and how do you know when you have 3 ounces? There are markings on your cream cheese package. I don't know if you guys can see this, but they're down here. Or if somebody's been using the cream cheese and you can't tell how much there is because it's not full, then you can always weigh it. Or you can always pack it into a measuring cup. Okay. So 3 ounces of that, and then it gets 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, half a teaspoon of vanilla, and just a little bit of salt to counteract all that sweetness. You're going to mix it with your hand mixer until it's smooth, and that's it. And then you're going to take your cinnamon rolls out when they're done, and you're going to kind of pour or use a butter knife to get that cream cheese frosting on your cinnamon rolls, and then voila. So this is not my recipe. It actually comes from allrecipes.com, and I will put the written out recipe on Google Classroom for you guys, or you can go to allrecipes.com. It's called Clone of Cinnabon. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Make these for your family. They're delicious.